The world is constantly evolving around us. Technology improves, markets expand, and industries boom. However, with change comes conflicts of ideas. In the 1960s, there was a counterculture that went against almost everything deemed accepted by society. Baby boomers looked to reforming issues that occurred around them and created movements which forever changed American history. The conflict between the need to increase agricultural output and environmental harm in the United States sparked the compromise reforms made to protect the earth from more harm.
For sale, $55,500.
In the 1950s, many new chemicals were being introduced.
Fungicides, nematicides, rodenticides, and herbicides.
With the war-born development of DDT.
World War II used DDT to kill insects, and this chemical was used in agriculture after the war. DDT is short for dichlorodiphenyltrichloroethane. It interferes with the nervous system, effectively exterminating unwanted pests. The use of pesticides was rapidly increasing. In 1945, total pesticide production was below 100 million pounds, and in 1972, it increased to 300 million.
People thought it was a good thing because they got action in solving a problem as they conceived it. They were, for example, complaining about mosquitoes. And if the spray truck came down the street, they were told to just stay indoors for a few minutes and everything would be all right.
The United States heavily relied on them to produce enough food that met the needs of a growing population. Without pesticides, prices would be higher and people would be living in hunger. There were many downfalls to these harmful chemicals. Nature's inhabitants were dying. Children were being poisoned. The natural world was falling apart.
Our little Julie was stillborn. The loss of our child may be a direct result to the chemicals. Please don't allow this to happen to anyone else before you get them out.
In June of 1962, Rachel Carson published a series of articles that explained the harmful effects of pesticides on the environment. After 4 months, a full book edition of her work came out named Silent Spring.
Up to now, 500,000 copies have been sold, and Silent Spring has been called the most controversial book of the year.
Her book was a direct hit on DDT. It outlined her beliefs on how synthetic chemical pesticides would upset the balance of nature.
The balance of nature is built of a series of interrelationships between living things and between living things and their environment. You can't just step in with some brute force and change one thing without changing a good many others.
She argued that it contaminated the environment and as a result threatened both wildlife and humans. It alarmed readers across America, especially the pesticide industry. They were appalled by her claims and launched counterattacks. In the fall of 1962, the National Agricultural Chemical Association spent almost $250,000 campaigning against her book by issuing warnings and distributing negative reviews. The Monsanto Chemical Company published The Desolate Year, a short story responding to Carson's Fable for Tomorrow chapter. Their version was the aftermath of a failure to use pesticides, where America is devastated by an insect plague. April 3, 1963, CBS News aired an hour-long primetime special documentary. In the documentary, major chemical companies rebutted her claims by stating that pesticides were a necessity to fulfilling society's agricultural needs. Without them, crops would be jeopardized and thus people would suffer from starvation.
Completely unsupported by scientific experimental evidence and general practical experience in the field. If man were to faithfully follow the teachings of Miss Carson, we would return to the Dark Ages, and the insects and diseases and vermin would once again inherit the earth.
After the broadcast, President John F. Kennedy ordered the President's Science Advisory Committee to investigate the issues Carson raised.
There's the possibility of dangerous long-range side effects from the widespread use of DDT and other pesticides. Have you considered asking the Department of Agriculture or the Public Health Service to take a closer look at this?
Yes, and I know that they already are. I think particularly, of course, since Ms. Carson's book, but they are examining the matter.
They concluded that her claims should be vindicated and DDT needs to be under closer investigation. The conflict between the belief of preserving nature's ecosystems and the belief of preserving agricultural habits was only at its beginning. Her book paved the way for young activists. They saw the direct connection of natural environment and mass industry. Environmentalism became a mass movement based on the cleanup and protection of nature. Many organizations were created to raise public awareness. They used many methods to advocate for the protection of Earth, such as sit-ins and funds. The Environmental Defense Fund, founded in 1967, increased an interest in organic farming and natural foods that would be grown without the use of synthetic chemicals. In 1969, they were able to convince Wisconsin that DDT was a hazardous pollutant and it should not be used in the state. In the late 60s, the Audubon Society set up the Rachel Carson Fund that would bring court cases against DDT. By 1970, the popularity of the environmental movement became to be evident. On April 22nd, the first Earth Day was organized by Senator Gaylord Nelson. 20 million people worldwide participated in the event. They staged demonstrations, planted trees, and gathered in parks.
This is Philadelphia on Earth Day.
President Richard Nixon established the Environmental Protection Agency by combining 15 federal agencies in December 1970. The Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and the Endangered Species Act all regulated how industry should handle the environment. The Pesticide Control Act, passed in 1972, was a program for controlling the sale, distribution, and application of pesticides through an administrative registration process. It prevented people from further hurting the ecosystem through harmful chemicals. The same year, the EPA banned DDT due to its harmful effects on the environment, such as wildlife and potentially human health. DDT was now known to be very dangerous. The work of Rachel Carson and other environmentalists continue to resonate in today's society. Contamination levels of toxic chemicals have decreased dramatically. Laws passed continue to regulate how industries handle the ecosystem. However, the compromise of environmental reforms did not prevent further conflict. Arguments on pesticides today is somewhat similar to arguments made in the 1960s. Some believe that they are a necessity to human life, and others believe that the hazards of pesticides outweigh its benefits. Although older environmental hazards have been addressed, there are new concerns such as global warming and the depletion of the ozone layer. The bee population is also declining at an alarming rate, and if they do extinct, food chains will collapse and many crops will become scarce. It is important to remember that society may always change, but we won't have a society if we destroy the environment.